Welcome to another Telltale Books video. I'm Greg. I'm continuing in this video my series about science fiction writer Hal Clement, who also was a science teacher, an astrophysicist, and a bomber pilot, which I'm going to put a photo up of that I came across. That's just a stock photo of the plane that he used to fly in World War II. It says in the introduction to this story, in um, the September 1945 issue of Astounding, that he was a pilot in World War II. This story then is his seventh published work and is a very popular one, and for good reasons. Okay, the story is Uncommon Sense, published in Astounding Science Fiction in September of 1945. Somewhere around here I have a copy of that issue, but I wasn't able to find it for the video, so I'll put that up on screen. And I do have, this story has been collected a lot. I have it in 4 different sources. I have the issue of Astounding. Place where I first read it is my copy of The Best of Hal Clement, published in, 1979 by Del Rey Books, with a, gotta say, I absolutely love this Henry Van Dongen cover on this book. This was one of my influences when I was a kid. I mean, I was already pretty influenced by 1979, but I saw this cover and I was liking this classic science fiction series from Del Rey and just fell in love with this and had to have this book. And before that, I really hadn't encountered Hal Clement all that much. So this was my big introduction to Hal Clement. I mean, I had read some things before that, but not much. This book really introduced me to a lot of Clement's work, and that cover just drew me in. It's so cool. That creature is so bizarre and funny looking and yet cool looking, and the painting is really well done. The drawing is excellent. Van Dongen started illustrating mainly for Astounding way back in the 1950s. And he kind of took a break in the 1960s, early 1970s, but then came back to it, to illustrating with a vengeance in the late 1970s, and did a ton of work, mostly for Del Rey Books. He did a lot of these best of covers at that time. One of the best science fiction illustrators. I think he probably would have been considered the best in the genre if it wasn't that there were too many. He I feel he was overshadowed by Frank Kelly Fraze. There were similarities between the two artists. Van Dongen is distinct, but there were similarities in the way they approached illustration. And I think Fraze became more popular because Fraze had a little wilder sense of humor, and he was a lot more prolific, and he didn't disappear in the 1960s. Frank Kelly Fraze kept working through the whole time, and then there was the Queen album that just made him so much more famous, and Van Dongen had to take a seat behind Fraze. But Van Dongen is definitely one of the greatest science fiction illustrators. Always loved his work, and he's always been a big influence over me as an artist. So I have Uncommon Sense in The Best of Hal Clement and in the Astounding Science Fiction issue from September of 1945. The story also appears in Small Changes, which I've shown previously, and again, wasn't convenient to grab it for the video, so I do have a copy of Small Changes. That one's out of print. It was published in 1969. But currently, you can find this story and many others in the Nespa Press book, of the Essential Hal Clement Volume 2, Music of Many Spheres, which is a collection of a lot of his best short stories. And I don't love the cover of that book. Sorry, I usually love the Nesfa Press covers. That one I don't really care for, but the stuff inside is what really matters, and it's a lot of great Hal Clement work. And like I say, go on Nesfa Press's website. You can order it, get a brand new copy. That's what I did. Excellent book. So, what is Uncommon Sense about? Why is it so popular? Main character's name is Cunningham, and he is a researcher going around to different places in the galaxy, studying, researching things. And he goes to a small, he goes to Star Deneb, and he has a crew in his ship. But the crew decides they want to steal his ship. So they mutiny, but he is able to disable things, crash land the ship on a moon-sized planet that orbits the star Deneb, and he's able to escape the craft. But the surface of this planet, it's moon-sized, but it's a planet, is kind of close to Deneb. So it's during the daytime, it's very, very hot. And he seeks refuge in a cave. But he wants to take his ship back before the crew can possibly um, repair the damage he did and take off without him. But in the way are the native life forms. And that's what really, really makes this story so incredible, is Clement had this imagination with alien life forms that became just famous. Um, I don't want to spoil things, but especially since I'm already forgetting specific details. I'll put up an illustration from the inside of Astounding that shows you some of the critters that were on this planet that he's watching. One of them is kind of crab-like and is vegetarian. And there's another one that is definitely a carnivore that preys on the plant-like ones and is bigger than Cunningham. So he's afraid that it's going to come after him. But there's reasons why all the life forms, when they get too close to him, they suddenly bolt, get the hell out of there. And it has to do with the science. That's where Hal Clement really, really pulls the head of the pack with his stories, is that he has some really cool science in here that is why the native life forms are acting the way they are. And the science of these life forms actually is ultimately what saves Cunningham's skin in the end. So the story, it is very well loved. It placed the Hugo Awards weren't around before, I believe, 1953. But in the 1990s, the World Science Fiction Convention started to give what they called retro Hugos, where they went back to the year of the very first Hugo Awards. They went back to the year of the very first World Science Fiction Convention in 1939 and voted what was the best stories from 1930 38, as if the Hugos would have actually happened in that year if they would have made that decision with the first World Science Fiction Convention and given Hugo Awards. So they polled whoever wanted to get involved, and people voted, just like on regular Hugos. They voted for the retro Hugo novella, novelette, short story. And they did this each year for a while until they covered all the years in which there were world science fiction conventions taking place up to the original Hugo Awards starting in 1953. So, Uncommon Sense, for the 1946 Retro Hugo Awards, voting on stories that were published in 1945, Uncommon Sense won Best Short Story for that year. And it's because Clement is just so good at this real science fiction story. And he makes them compelling. He makes them enjoyable. He makes them fascinating. He makes them interesting. You can't bring your expectations of literature to a story like this because it's got wholly different literary goals than Ernest Hemingway had. And as a representative of 1940s hard science fiction stories, Uncommon Sense is definitely one of the best. And so I think I said it already. I'm giving this a top tail. It's on our list already. And if you love hard science fiction, and especially if you love Hal Clement, if you haven't already read Uncommon Sense, you need to correct that and go back and read this story because it is really, really good. Very short. Almost wish it were more, but really it doesn't need to be. It makes its point. It gets across what Clement was trying to do with it. It's perfect in and of itself. And by the way, later on in the 1970s, Hal Clement wrote more stories with this character of Cunningham. His full name is Laird Cunningham. So, Uncommon Sense, then, is the first of a series of 4 stories, all shorter works. The second one being The Logical Life, and then comes Stuck with It, and then comes Status Symbol. But these were all published like 30 years later, after Uncommon Sense. So for a long time, Uncommon Sense was a standalone, not part of a series. But then he wrote more, and so now it's part of a short series. And so I won't be getting to the rest of the series for quite a while because I'm going in publication order, and I won't get to the 1970s Hal Clement for a while. Let's see. The next one, Logical Life, is number 36 on my list, and I'm still back at number 7. Okay, so it's going to be a while, but I will cover the rest of the series. Hopefully, it won't be 30 years before I get there. So the next Hal Clement I will get into is a story called Cold Front, published in July of 1946, almost a year later, but again in Astounding. This one's a little longer. It's a novelette. So have you read Uncommon Sense? It's a popular story. A lot of you older guys out there probably have already read this and maybe have some insights that I don't have into this story. Leave them in the comments below. Insights about the story, insights about Hal Clement, that's the comments I want. Everything else is just not important. So leave your comments. If you like this video, click the like button. If you're not subscribed, subscribe to us and come on back for Cold Front and all the other Hal Clement stories that I got planned for the near future, and all the other authors that I talk about, sometimes with Emily.